Hello, Replit community. Welcome to Replit 101, where we're going to answer all your coding questions from the last 2 weeks. Now, remember, we always try and prioritize our live viewers. Last week, we had lots and lots of questions to the point where we barely got on to any of the questions I had queued up. In fact, when I showed you my tabs, people got a bit freaked out by them because there were a lot of tabs queued up and ready to go. I'll try my best not to show you those this week if I can. But if we don't get any questions from the live audience today, or if we start getting them a little bit later, that's fine. Please do just pop them in the chat as and when you get to them, and we'll do our best to answer live questions first. But I do have a bunch of cool questions queued up for tonight. But before we start, we always like to go through the latest news and the happening. Can't speak tonight. The latest news and what's happening in Replit over the last 2 weeks. Our big key change over the last couple of weeks has been bounties. Now, if you've not seen bounties before, I really have to encourage you to go and take a look, because bounties by far is one of the coolest things you can do if you know anything about coding. And in fact, I pushed a lot of people and a lot of students to go and take a look at it. Let's have a look at the bounties link on the left-hand side. Now, bounties works in 2 ways. You can either post a bounty to get a bit of coding work done that maybe you don't have the expertise or the time for yourself, and you put up an amount of cycles to use as payment in that. If you're a bounty hunter, you can bid and ask to take part in the bounties and say what your specialty is and put something towards it. And you'll see there's a lot of good bounties on here. In fact, at the moment, there's several multiple $100 bounties available. Now, cycles running bounties are available for power-ups at any time, or for some people at the moment, they can be cashed out into local currencies once you've earned more than 10,000 cycles, which is 100 USD or more. If you want to be part of the Bounty Hunter program, go onto the bounties page. Here on the bottom, click Learn More About Bounties, where there's a bounty hunting section, and it'll tell you all about it and how to apply. Please do go and apply if you've got programming expertise and you think you can solve some of these problems, because it's a nice little money earner. And more than that, it's a great thing to do. I can see Michael in the chat there. Can we talk about GPT Chat? I think, Mike, that's all I've been talking about for the last couple of days. But we can, if you want to. If we want to have a look at how we can use that with Replit, I'm more than happy to take that. Although GPT Chat's been down for me a lot today. But if you've got any questions about GPT Chat and how it can be used with Replit in particular, I'm happy to look at that and answer those. Jay Clinton, usernames. I'm so rubbish at reading usernames. I do apologize. I wish I'd do bounties, but I'm a newbie. There's something to aspire to. Bounties, don't forget, are not just for you to do and earn the cycles. They're also ways of asking for things to happen. So if you happen to have some cycles or you've bought some cycles, it's a good way of saying, oh, can somebody give me an example of a program that does this, and help you out as well in ways that AI maybe can't. Because AI and GPT Chat isn't all the way there yet. It's getting there, but the bounties is a brilliant addition to that. There's some really good ones available at the minute. In fact, I've got somebody working on one for me at the moment to generate a self-destructing REPL. It sounds dramatic, but basically it's one that turns itself into a read-only mode once we finish working on it. But, you know, there's some really high-value ones. There's a Microsoft Teams bot setup one for $720, which is 72,000 cycles. That's an amazing amount of money to get out of this. So if you've got the skills, please do go and take a look, because bounties is a great place to be and is an absolutely happening community at the moment. As well as that, we of course have Ghostwriter, which is going great for us at the moment. I've just finished a series on Ghostwriter. There'll be a 5-lesson mini-series course appearing on the Learn page in the next few days, hopefully Friday, but possibly Monday. We'll see how we go with that. Fingers crossed. And the reason I'm able to do that is because 100 Days of Code, the final piece of content, comes out this week. That's right. Day 100, up to and including day 100, will be published by the end of this week. So that means finally you can sit there and do all 100 days. If you or friends or acquaintances have been holding off doing the 100 Days of Code course because it wasn't all there, it is now. And I would make a joke about my hairline receding since spending a lot of time doing it, but you've seen the videos. It's not got much better. It's not got much worse. It's genetics, unfortunately. So there's all the cool things happening in Replit. And oh, I do have to show you one really cool thing, which I think is really nice. You may have seen this last week as well. But if I create just a random REPL at the moment, our sidebar was updated recently to be a bit more flexible and a bit more useful. I'm sure you guys all saw that. But it was a bit heavy on space. But look at what's been done now. I think this is pretty cool. I think the way they've changed it, the way our engineering team has changed it to be individual icons. Remember that the metaphor here is not that you click on them, things appear. You can drag things out of here and place them on the page wherever you want. So it's very, very customizable. Bring a debugger out in your databases and stick them exactly where you want. You have to open them and move them around. It's a really powerful way of working. I think this update is just the icing on the cake. That is a beautiful little update that helps out a lot. So let's get started with the questions for today and see where we are. By the way, I hope you like the new green screen setup. I finally bought a light so I can use my green screen at night in the UK, which hopefully means that we can see a bit more of what's on the screen and a bit less of me and my dodgy background. So this is the first question that I picked up on. This is a 14-day-old question, so it was posted just after Replit 101 last week. But I thought it was important to take a look at because the question itself is reasonably nuanced and it's a good question, but it has a fundamental misunderstanding of how things work in Python. I'm just going to stop there because James C's got a quick question here. Is Replit only coding on Python? It's not, James. It's coding in pretty much any language you want. In fact, one of the big benefits about Replit, in my opinion, is that there's so many languages. I'll go make a new REPL and we'll see what we've got. So we've got Python there. It's because it's one of my favorites. We can build a website as well, HTML, CSS. But if you scroll down this list, you'll see that there's almost an infinite amount of languages on here because it does support a thing called Nix under the surface, which means that we can pretty much build a REPL template for anything you want. So maybe you want to program in C, one of the first programming languages I ever taught. We've got templates for that. A bit of Java, which is very popular in the commercial industry. There we go. TypeScript, which is partially what Replit is built on. You could go and build a bit of that if you want to. There are, a massive amount of choices. And if you just want to sort of browse through them to get an idea, on the templates page, which is just here, you can go through and have a look at the scroller and see sort of what we've got. There's a bot section, there's a graphics, there's a website, and all the big ones are identified there. It's a really great place to go and have a look if you're interested. Angular, I've never actually done Angular. Maybe that should go on my list over Christmas when I've got a bit of time. Maybe I'll have a look. Right, back to the question, sorry. And Michael, if you do want to talk a little bit about GPT Chat and you've got a specific question or you just want to go through sort of a workflow, please pop it in the chat and we'll take a look. As long as it's working. As I said, it's been a bit up and down for me today. So this question I really wanted to address today because I think this is an interesting thing about Python compared to how other languages work. Now, the question here is about day 45, where I was talking in 100 Days of Code about how you could change an item in a list. And the way that I normally do that is I take the item out of the list and I put a new one in. And that might be a bit weird for most people because it seems like we're doing too many options. And the reason that I do that is because we're using what we call a Pythonic way of working through a list. There is a traditional way of working through a list, which we looked at quickly in 100 Days of Code, but I didn't spend much time on it, which is to use the indexes. And that means when you create a for loop, and in this example here, we're using a Pythonic for loop, what's happening in this for loop is it's making a variable called row for each row in to do. And it's copying that row into the variable row. That means you can manipulate that copy, but none of the changes you make to that will find their way back into the main list. So unfortunately, you can't just edit an item in the list by saying, oh, row, square brackets, whatever the key is or whatever the index is, becomes something inside of a Pythonic loop of this kind. If you directly addressed the index, so you had for I in range len brackets to do, so you go through the index of each item, you could directly address each part of the row and you could change it. But unfortunately, and Damien's asked this, unfortunately, there isn't a way of working it out in the Pythonic way without having to remove that row. I suppose we could search for the row, get the index, but there's a lot more effort. If you want to directly edit the row, by far the easiest way to do that is to actually just take the value of the index and loop through it. In fact, what we'll do is very quickly build a piece of sample code to show you that. So I'll do this in Python. And again, I'll make sure that we have copies of all this stuff if you're interested. And is that big enough for us to see? I think so. Let's just make a list of lists. Let's do and we'll hope this works. I'm trying to be a bit cheeky here. That seems to work. So let's print that out. Oh, I haven't even set it to a variable. You want to know what all this gray stuff popping up is? I've got Ghostwriter turned on. So it's trying to suggest bits of code for me and help me out. Right. So I want maybe I just want that. There we go. If I do that. There we go. So I've got a list of lists. It's not working, is it? Right. Okay. Do you know what I'll do? I'm just going to make a quick list with some items in it. And it's just very quickly going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If we run this, here we go. We've got our first row, our second row, our third row. So if I put my Pythonic list in place now for row in my list, you see that Ghostwriter is helping me out there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to print out the row so you can see how that works. So what's happening is that Python's taking a copy of each row and saving it as the variable row temporarily. Now, if I were to do this, row equals none, that should delete each row. And if I run it, it'll say none, none, none. So it looks on the surface like I've deleted it. But if I come down here now and I print out my list, notice it's intact. And that's because what's happening each iteration is that row is a copy of the row. That's how this form of Pythonic interpretation works. Let's do it the other way where we can directly address the row itself though. If I do for I in len my list, that will go through the indexes. So now if I do my list square brackets I, the index of the list becomes that. I can print out each one and this should affect the main list. What have I done here now? Line 3 for I in len my list, int objects not iterable. What am I doing? Oh, range. It's funny the things you forget. There we go. There we go. Hopefully you can see now that the original array in each row is being manipulated directly because we're talking about the index of it rather than the copy of it that we got with a Pythonic style of list. So what I'm going to do very quickly is take a quick copy of that address and we'll pop that in the answer for the person here. And I'll come back to that later to give them a link to everything they go into. So hopefully that answers the first question for you, which is, I think, an important difference. It's a difference between taking a copy of each row and being able to look at it, which is the default in Python, basically, or directly pointing at an item in memory. And there's advantages and disadvantages to either way of working. It's just a case of what you prefer, really. I, in Python, prefer to do it the Pythonic way, but that's just me. Okay, here is a question that I said we do first today, and I was a bit naughty and we did it second. You can see me there putting myself down. We'll be covering it first up. So if our original poster here, Florist 2001, if you're in the chat, do say hi. You've got an interesting question here. So they're trying to scrape of that just to show you that it works, which is quite nice. So what it's doing is it is scraping this website address. It's getting links to Letterboxd. Did you say Letterboxd or Letterboxd? I say Letterboxd, but if they wanted proper pronunciation of their websites, they wouldn't just stick a random letter on the end of it, would they? But actually, I'm on the wrong side, aren't I? Let me jump over to the other side so I'm not in the way of the output. Right. There we go. That jitters a little bit on the stream, doesn't it? I'm sure it does. It looked like it was for me. You can see there what it's doing is it's scraping all that data. Was actually about the CSS file. And there's a bit of back and forth going on with Programmer, with Zero, and Florist to try and sort the problem out. Now, my first thought was this, is that Flask, as it stands, you know, I've done a bit of Flask in 100 Days of Code. Flask doesn't just serve up its static page automatically. You normally have to tell it and define it that you want that. Now, the one thing I've never used in this code stack is the render template. It's because I didn't teach it as part of 100 Days of Code. It is a library that I've seen used before, but I've never really used it myself. But it's a way of applying a template to each page. In 100 Days of Code, we just did an HTML page. We used f equals open to bring it in, and we used replace to replace these strings with things we wanted, which is a very naive way of working at it. Render template is probably better. And I believe, because I had a little fiddle with it, that if you use render template, it automatically sets up your static folder. So everything should work. So if I run this website now, and it's going to take a bit of time because it's installing all its stuff. I had this running earlier, clearly. I should have maybe pressed the play button before getting on the live stream. By the way, if you are finding these builds a little bit slow, of course, the way to increase your CPU is to purchase some cycles, and then you'll get access to boosts. Boosts allow you to turn the speed of the CPU on your container up. It's also a part of the hacker plan as well. If you want to get that, it's a great Christmas present. Purchase it for yourself, treat yourself. That's what I always used to do. But boosts is a really, really good way of turning the speed of your CPU up whilst you're doing things like that. And you can turn it on or off dynamically, or you can leave it on for a REPL that needs it. Really good for Java REPLs, by the way, because they take a lot of resources, those Java REPLs. So that's running now. So let's pop the website up. Here we go. There it is. Now, if the CSS page is there, and I apologize for the amount of tabs I've got, if the CSS page is there, we should be able to go to /static/style.css. You can see there that it is loading that page. That page is there. It is being served up. This page is accessing it. But the question went on further then to say, well, if I go to style CSS and I change it from green to, I don't know, blue, then nothing changes. And that's true. Nothing's changed here. I'm refreshing the page. And now it just did. Let's have a look at what's happened to that site. Static style.css. You can see now it's updated. The way in which templating is working is it doesn't actually load a copy of all the things it's using every single time the page is refreshed. When the page is refreshed initially, it'll use a cache to make things speed up. And you can see there, that's not picking up either because it's doing a soft refresh each time. I go back up here and refresh it here, I'm getting a solid refresh. And the way I did that was I held shift down when I clicked refresh. And that tells the server that I want fresh copies of everything. In our developer tools here, I'm sure there is a way to do that in the resources. I don't know where that option is. I'm sure it's in here somewhere. We can probably tell it to do it, but I always like doing my web development in full screen anyway. But the hard refresh gets the latest copy. it may take a few seconds for the changes to the CSS file to update. And that is because templates, the templates library that you're using requires, uses a bit of a cache and doesn't always fetch the page just to keep the web server running. If you think about the way we did it in 100 Days of Code, it's really, really wasteful. Every time somebody tries to access your web page or any page on your website, it reads a file from a disk and does some computation. If we get more than a couple of 100,000 visitors at the same time, that website's going down because the CPU won't be able to deal with it. Templates is actually doing a really, really clever thing, and it's keeping a copy of everything that's already generated and just going, oh, yeah, here we go. Here's the copy. Here's the copy. And that's an easier job than having to build everything from scratch each and every time, which is great, which is nice. The problem is that when you're trying to change an site, that's probably not what you want. The main thing you need to do is just give it a little bit of time. And you can also force it to do a refresh by, in the main window, looking at it full screen, hitting Shift and refresh in Chrome. And that will force it to do a refresh of every component, and the cache then will be emptied in your web browser as well. So it won't be storing an old copy of anything. So hopefully there, we've answered that question. I'll pop the link on there for that user as well later on, so they can see how to solve that exact problem. But I thought that was pretty cool. And again, I've never used this render template library. It seems like something that I want to get into and learn about. I've always been a bit of a PHP fan myself. So learning Flask and making it something that is part of my repertoire was something I did whilst I was still a teacher, because for years and years, I taught Python. And then when everyone did their final project, I tried to teach them PHP very, very quickly. And as the numbers of students in my classes crept up, that became more difficult. So Flask was an obvious place to take people because they know the Python already. There's no new syntax to learn, which is why I do quite like Flask as a web development server language. And of course, you could incorporate it with other Python files as well. Moving on to the next question then. How long have we been going for tonight? Oh, half an hour already. Time is flying by. We already answered like one question. Let's have a look at the next question in the list. Okay, this is an interesting one. We're getting a list index out of range here. And it's really, really quite an interesting solution here. But Matt Destroyer managed to fix it very, very simply. And it's because this user on day 44 was having a similar problem to the user we'd looked at on day 45, confusing the idea of looping through indexes with the Pythonic loop, which takes a copy of everything. Now, if you've learned any programming before in any of the languages, most languages don't do that Pythonic loop. They do a standard index-based loop, which means you have to work out the first and last number, the size of the array, the size of the list, and work through it in step. And you manipulate the direct copy of the list. Now, that's a little bit dangerous in some cases. So Python does a really nice thing and takes copies of each one. And it's a nicer way to work with lists, quite honestly. And I'm not a big fan of Python as a language. I think Python takes a lot of shortcuts and there's a lot of things that are difficult for learners to start with. And I'm sure a lot of you had trouble when you learned Python getting to grips with indentation being part of the language. That's very unusual. When we did on the 100 days, when we did the short course on HTML, and we just sort of went, hey, yeah, there's indentation doesn't matter. How free did you feel? How free did you feel? But one of the things I think that Python does really, really well is its behavior of lists. The fact you can have multiple data types, the fact that it takes copies. The problem is that people who come from other programming languages bring this preconception of what a list should be, and that's going through the indexes. You can use those lists in Python, but it's not the best way to work through something and manipulate it if you can help it. And that's what this user had a problem with there, solved by Matt Destroyer very, very quickly. And this is why the ask.replit.com forums are brilliant, because we've not only got the wonderful Ian at Replit, who is a teacher himself and comes in and helps and asks questions and tries to sort out problems. But we've also got a massive team now of volunteers and people that do spend time on the forums and try and help each other. We've got Hugo, we've got Ethan, we've got Matt, we've got a bunch of people that are in here trying to make a difference and trying to improve the way people code. So please do get on the Ask forums if you're not there already. It's a great place and a friendly place to ask questions and possibly get your questions answered. And certainly every 2 weeks, I do a big trawl of all the posts on there to see which questions might be good for Replit 101, which is always nice. So there's a chance that your question will be picked up by me if it's been answered. Okay, next we're going to go to the Discord. And this is really nice because I answered this earlier. And as you can see there, the user was quite happy that I answered their question. But the question here is a common one, actually. And it's, how do you detect keys that are not letters and numbers on a keyboard in Python? And this isn't just true for Python. This is actually true for lots of languages. I believe that in older languages like C, this is my vague recollection from last time I did C, which is probably about 10 years ago. I believe you can just read every key on the keyboard. But more modern languages tend to be looking, when they look for input, for actual text or numeric characters, because they are the things that need to be analyzed. They're not looking at every single keystroke and trying to interpret what's happening. And this is a problem if you want to build software that uses the keys, because what do? Do you just use WASD for everything and assume that everyone's a gamer? Probably is the answer. But if you want to go and use the arrow keys, you have to bring in some specific libraries. Now, Distend here asked the question, how can I detect arrow keys? I tried PyInput, PyInput. Oh, yeah, I get it. PyInput, Py. Oh, these library names, comedy gold, I think. So I tried PyInput, but I couldn't manage to install it. I tried keyboard module, but it needs root. The one I always use is Curses. Curses is a library specifically designed for picking up other keyboard commands, and actually it almost takes over input. In fact, I don't think you can use input with it. I think you have to use something else. It's been a while since I used it properly, but I'll pop up my example code. I've already got it there. Look at me being prepared. So this is the example code, and literally all I had to do was pop the code in, click run, and Replit installed the packages for me. You can go to the package manager and do it manually if you want to, but it just did it for me. And once you run it, you'll see here that in the console, not a lot's happening. But if you click, again, if I tap keys here, nothing's being read in the console. And this is another mistake people make as well, is that they write a program to capture the input from the keyboard and then don't actually click on the part of the window that's doing that. Now, if I'm in here, actually capturing the up, down, left, and right of my keystrokes, which is pretty cool. I'm on the wrong side again, because I'm over the top of the code. Let me jump to the other side. Go on. And this is where it stutters terribly on the stream. It looks beautiful on my monitor here, but I can see that being something that looks really weird on the YouTube replays. Just a quick shout out and a reminder, if you are watching live and you've got a coding question or you want to contribute to the answer, please do. We prioritize all live questions over the ones we've got queued up to answer. It's nice when we have a little bit of live because we can have a bit of back and forth and some interaction. Okay, so Curses is a really nice thing. You import the library, you take over the screen, you turn off input echoing, and basically that's, I press A, it would put A on the screen. So that means it's full control of the keyboard. And then we start tracking everything. Now you have to put it in a loop to keep reading it. And I bet actually CPU utilization is quite low on that, which is quite nice. We're constantly trying to get that. And then we can read the specific keys by using curses dot. And there's key combinations for all the classic keys that you might want to look for, space, control, command, all that sort of stuff have their individual keys. So that's a really common way for people who want to do a bit more with software development, to have control of the keyboard properly. I'll pop the link to that code in the YouTube chat if you'd like to go and get a copy of that and start playing around with cursors. But it is the library I've recommended to a bunch of people, and it does even allow you to make rudimentary games. But honestly, if you want to get into games development, I would recommend using our Kaboom games development environment. It is really cool. It's very, very easy to get up and running in games, and it uses JavaScript as its basis. So it's a very, very practical language to learn, and you can do a lot with it very, very quickly. So if you are interested in games development, and this is why you want to do that, that's a good option. If you want to stay in the land of Python, then we have Pygame templates as well. Pygame templates, as it sort of says, is Python with games. So you can use your existing Python knowledge to expand upon that. Okay, question in the chat. Mr. Bartowski. So to ask, which programs or courses would you suggest after a newbie is done with 100 days? Some front-end experience or something else? I'm completely new at day 52. Okay, so day 52, you're probably at the grind stage, I would imagine. Let me remind myself, what is day 52? Sorry, I've been doing day 100 this week. It's hard to remember sometimes where we've come from. But let me have a look. So day 52 is try and accept. So you're still on the fundamentals, really. You're still on the stuff that needs to stack together before you start doing big projects. Let's have a look. There's a tough time about day 66 where we have 3 days of UI design into Kinter. If you've done that, have you ever used Kinter? Yeah. It's an important thing to look at. It's not the most exciting thing in the world because it all looks a bit 1990s, but it is the main GUI that they use in Python. It's not very nice, but we look at it as an idea. After that, though, we get onto web development using Flask, scraping websites using APIs and all that good stuff, sort of more modern project development. But honestly, I can't say what I would go and do next. At the end of day 100, you have enough skills with back-end and a small amount of front-end development to really know what you're interested in. And at that point, for me, it's all about personal projects, because all through 100 days of code, we've really tried to give you a meaningful project every day. Sometimes it's a bit silly. Sometimes it's a bingo card for my nan. Sometimes it's daft things like that. But the bigger projects we give you scattered throughout are there to combine skills together and make you think around the problems. And they are the ones which are what real software development is like, really. And if you ever get stuck on them, don't forget that I've recorded solutions for everything from, I think, maybe day 15, something like that. But I've recorded solutions for the vast majority of them. You can watch me work through it, make mistakes, and I'll talk through my thought process. When you get to day 100, though, you need to make your own projects. Honestly, you need to be going and thinking, what do I want to make? What are things that would be useful to me? And they're the skills that we've tried to give you in 100 days. After 100 days, Mr. Bartowski, you may think, one of the projects close to the end of 100 days is create a bot that will check the price of something that is that I'm interested in, and if it falls below a certain level, lets me know. Now, I know there are a bunch of websites that do that for the big websites like Amazon.com and stuff like that, but there are not many bots that will do that for a small shop near you that does a bit of online ordering, or your local camera supplier or something like that. So the bot you build could be specific to something you're interested in. And we've tried to give you enough skills that you can pick a project you want to do. I would very much encourage you to go and build something that you've wanted to make, even if you've no idea really how to get started, because the process of working on a project that you've picked for yourself is intrinsically more motivating than just doing more courses. And you can get course fatigue. After 100 days, I'd be treating myself and doing something for me, quite honestly, because you've had a good success after that point. if I was pushed and and like 100%, what would I want to do? I certainly feel that after our 100 days of code, I'd want to go and find out a little bit more about um, uh, data science, because we didn't really touch on that in the 100 days. Hopefully, I'll build a data science course in the near future to extend 100 days a little bit, but no timeline on that just yet. That's something I'd like to do. That's not necessarily something we've got in the plans. So I'd look for something like that, because that'll extend your knowledge in a different way. I'd also look at any games dev courses. Certainly, we've got a bunch of stuff in Kaboom, and a bunch of stuff as well for Pygame, which would help your knowledge in that direction, because that's a different kind of programming as well. And it just gives you a bit of a flavor in all these different areas. And the more you learn, the bigger your knowledge base gets, the more you know what you want to do. And after 100 days of code, it's really important that you find something you want to build. And of course, if you're stuck for ideas, get on the bounties page, become a bounty hunter. Not all the bounties are $800. Can you bring these 15 bots together and do something really complicated? Some of them are very, very simple web scraping jobs that you will be able to achieve, that you will be able to do after 100 days of code. And even if you can't complete them, there's some good ideas there for projects that you might think, oh, I might have a go at that myself, because that seems like an interesting challenge. But after 100 days of code, you really need to pick your own projects and work on those and see what information you can grab together, which I suppose takes us on to Michael's question. And maybe we'll take a quick look at this today, actually, because we've got about 15 minutes thereabouts. But GPT Chat, which is OpenAI's latest version of, well, their natural language AI. It's very impressive. It's very, very impressive. And it's particularly impressive for coding. And it's particularly helpful, I think, when combined with things like Ghostwriter that we have on platform. And in particular, and in particular, Replit itself. Because if you can ask it the right questions, you get the right output. If you need a bit of guidance, you just need to ask questions to it. GPT Chat is very much like a peer programmer that sort of knows what they're doing. Now, to bring up Michael's question, he says, I understand it makes mistakes and requires prompts, but as someone who has just recently started learning to code, I feel I might never get a job now, but I will still do it for personal growth. I'd say, Mr. Batowski, thank you for that. I would just say this, look, never doubt yourself, Michael, right? We are always going to need programmers, okay? I would say that GPT Chat feels very much to me like somebody with a lot of confidence and not a full working picture of how everything works. So occasionally it will, in a very eloquent, in a very nice way, tell you something that's just plain wrong. And there's a couple of threads going around Twitter where they illustrate this perfectly. There's one which is very, very indicative, where somebody's forcibly trying to ask it, what is the fastest land mammal? And it keeps saying birds and fish. And the person is redefining what a mammal is, asking GPT Chat to tell it what a mammal is, and it's still coming up with the wrong answer. So there's always going to be that element of, it's a great tool, but it isn't a complete replacement for a programmer. Now, what it is a multiplying tool. In other words, it will increase your ability to work without having to mode shift. And this is particularly important. And this is why tools like Ghostwriter on Replit's platform, currently $10 a month, really, really worth it, honestly, please go and play with it, are so good. Because if you know an amount of programming, if you've done the 100 days of code, and you have a resource like Ghostwriter, and then you pair that with GPT Chat as well, you've got enough knowledge to be able to pull from different resources and construct work. Michael, there's never going to be a situation where you're unable to get a job with it. You've just got to keep pushing and building stuff. And GPT Chat is a great way of helping you get enough information and enough context on something to be able to work. So what I'll just do very quickly is I'll pull up GPT Chat just to demo it very quickly and how it can work well with Replit. Now, they've just said that they're having higher than usual demand, so we'll see how well this works. But one of the nice things about GPT Chat is you can just ask it in plain English questions. So you could say something like, how do I make a scrolling banner effect in Python? Just off the top of my head there. And they are experiencing high load because we get absolutely nothing in return. I'll try again and see how we do. It rate limited me earlier and I was getting annoyed at it for not answering me. But this is one of the limitations with AI. If you've got the knowledge yourself, it's not really a problem. This ain't going to work today, is it? Well, we can't really demo ChatGPT today because they're having a bit of a day of it. But normally what it does, it gives you actually good answers. I'll have a quick look at my desktop because I was screenshotting some of the answers I was getting from it earlier on. Okay, so here's an interesting one. So part of what I was doing over the last couple of days is I've been working on a course on Ghostwriter. And as part of that, I've been trying to upskill my knowledge in JavaScript because I thought if I was going to do a course on Ghostwriter, I don't just want to talk about Python because that's what I've been doing for 100 days. Let's look at some other languages. And my knowledge of JavaScript, I learned JavaScript when the internet was new. So it's not that modern. So what I wanted to do is look at how modern JavaScript differs from like classic JavaScript. So I just asked it a question. I said, can you give me some examples of old and more modern JavaScript syntax and the features that are different? And it did this for me. You know, it gave me good explanations with examples of code and how they work. And this is particularly good for me because what I'm trying to look at, what I'm trying to do is I have an existing knowledge base, but I just need to know what's new since last time. Show me the examples. And GPT-3 has done a brilliant job here of showing me the differences. And I remember looking at this first one and going, ah, that makes so much sense. That's quite nice. That's a nice way of doing it. And I think last time we did Replit 101, we were talking about async awaits. And I was sort of going, I was sucking my teeth and going, ooh, that's a painful thing to do. But you can imagine if GPT-3 was, if GPT Chat, GPT-3, same sort of thing. That's sort of the underlying technology, GPT-3. The GPT Chat itself, if it was working tonight, I could ask it things like, how does async await work? Can you give us some examples? Why does it keep doing this to me? And it'd be great. This is interesting as well, because this is literally is the way I would have extracted values from an array in JavaScript tradition. And you can see it's almost like I planned this tonight because it's the same idea here, but you can actually use destructuring and you can do things a little bit backwards. And I thought this sort of stuff is blowing my mind. I took it with a grain of salt though, because we know that GPT-3 can give us information that it says very, very strongly is correct and necessarily isn't. So I copied these bits of code, I put them into REPLs, and I just got them working straight away. And that's the beauty of Replit in tandem with GPT Chat. It'll give you a sample of code and you can go copy, stick it in there, run. And in less than a second, you've got that loop going of code, get it working. In fact, there are examples on Twitter of people building entire software stacks using that. I've got to stop and say hello to Buddy. Buddy, it's not a new chair, same chair, but I've got a light so my green screen works in the night. That's all it is. I've got to say hello to Sam as well. I think it's the same Sam that I used to teach. So hello, Sam, if it is you. Nice to see you. One of the reasons that I think, and back to Michael's questions here, one of the things I think, Michael, that you should never get too disheartened about a technology like ChatGPT, GPT-3, or Ghostwriter. They are always going to be additions to a programmer. And I'll be honest, right? I have this Ghostwriter course I've written as the quickest turnaround of anything I've ever done for Replit. And if I can get it out by Friday, it'll be amazing because I started planning on Monday. I recorded on Tuesday. I edited and I'm writing it today, and hopefully it'll be published on Friday. And the reason I was able to achieve such a quick turnaround with that was I was able to augment my existing knowledge by relying on Ghostwriter itself to help me generate code in languages that I was unfamiliar with, to help me debug code in languages I was unfamiliar with, but also using a bit of GPT-3 to help me with some examples that would let me show things off in a better light or help me stretch my understanding. Okay. You still do need to ask it a question and be able to interpret the results. It's not just a case of copying and pasting the code. Sometimes it's just going to give you code that errors. And GPT-3 is not very good at going, that doesn't work. Can you give me another one? Because I've tried that and it gives you the same code. It might change a variable name or something, but it does give you the same code. But this is the sort of output you get from ChatGPT. We'll have one more look to see if it works before we finish up for today. But I think there's a couple of articles in the newspapers today about it. So I imagine lots of people that weren't aware of it are taking a look. Right, so Python example, a scrolling banner. Yeah, that ain't working today, is it? If we're still interested, if we've got some interest, then please come back next time and we'll have a look at it. I think our next Replit 101 is the 22nd of December. So the last one of the year. I will pop a Santa hat on just if I can find one to fit my big old head, because this is an oversized head. I'm aware of that. I have to buy hats. If I can find one that fits, I'll pop it on just for the end of year celebrations. But again, Michael, please don't think you'll never get a job. If you practice and if you hone your skills, you will be able to. And the important thing is that you take these tools for what they are. They are very complex and comprehensive tools. They are not yet a replacement for somebody that is very technical or very adept at it. And in fact, they will make you a better programmer because they can augment what you can already do. Somebody that's passed 100 days will have enough code knowledge with these tools like Ghostwriter, like GPT-3, to be able to generate much better, much broader programs than they ever could on their own. But the same would be true if, you paid me to fly out and sit next to you for a couple of weeks and help you with your code. It's that sort of thing. No problem, Michael. Thank you. Yeah, but do get back to 100 days of code. And I will just say, power through the Takinta days. Even in the videos there's about 4 of them. I say, if this ain't for you, skip ahead 4 videos because they are a little bit GUIs in Python. It's worth knowing a little bit about them, but it's very 1990s, it feels like. Let's see. There's been a lot going on in the chat since we started talking there. Yes, James, please do keep going as well. And honestly, I know I work for them, but the reason I work for Replit is because they made such a difference to the lives of the students I taught, the ability for them to engage with programming and just have this brilliant resource at their fingertips. I gush about this all the time. Replit, to me, replaced all my technology stack really for coding. And I code a lot, I've got a master's degree, I've got a computer science degree, a bachelor's as well. I've been programming for decades, and I don't know the last time I updated VS Code. I suspect the version I have is from the dark ages. Working for them, you get to see the hard work that goes in, the stuff behind the scenes, and honestly, the engineers at Replit really sweat the small details, and it's why I like it so much. Things like Ghostwriter really add to the experience. Things like boosts, always on, all that stuff that they charge very, very little for, honestly. It all adds to the experience. And, I would really encourage you, if you've got any spare cash over the holiday period, or you get a random injection of funds from a present or something, purchase some cycles, try Ghostwriter, try some of the boosts. You won't be sorry. It'll make your coding 10 times better. But, shy away from using Ghostwriter to complete the 100 days if you can, because it's very good at working out the answers to my solutions. Michael, I'd love to do a 100 days code of JavaScript, but maybe not straight away in 2023. I've just recovered more or less from doing the last 100 days, and I'd want to plan that out nicely because there's a lot to JavaScript that has changed since I was, properly fluent in it. I can still do a good work in JavaScript, but that's something that we need to look at in a bit more detail. It is one of the top requests, though. So, we'll put it in there somewhere. I'm sure we'll get to it at some point. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. So, shall we take a look at one more problem? And again, I'll just throw it out there to the chat. If you've got any questions you want me to look at, I'm happy to take questions from the live chat before we go into any other questions here. But as I'm waiting for that to come through, because I'm about a 20-second delay, we'll have a quick look at some of the questions here and try and prioritize it. Oh, this is a nice one. This is a really nice one, actually. I love the wording of this question as well, because this is something that my students would always ask me. They'd say, I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. Is this Replit not working? And the answer nearly always was, no, you've misunderstood something. So here the question is this Replit's fault or my fault? And this is the top 10 of common mistakes. Look at the code there. There's a call to a subroutine, then some comments, and then a definition of a subroutine. Because code is read by the interpreter top to bottom, if you don't have the definition before the call, it is going to get confused. Behind the scenes, this works in a really interesting way. And I used to have to teach this as part of A-level computer science about interpreters and turning raw code into actual binary values that can be run by the computer and the CPU. And one of the first things that the compiler, or in this case, the interpreter does, is it creates a thing called a symbol table, where it takes all the variables, it takes all the definition names, and it makes a big list of where they are, which line of code they're on, so that when it sees a reference to them, it knows where to look. So one of the first things it does when it sees def training is it goes, oh, training is here. If it sees the call, the bit that says do the training subroutine, before it's seen the def, it doesn't know where it is. So the reason that would be erroring, that would be shouting, is because this line of code is just in the wrong place. This line of code needs to always come after the definition, which is a bit of a faff. And thankfully, Matt came in and sorted that out. But it is a really common mistake. I always try and model this in my 100 Days of Code videos. I always try and go back to the top to put the subroutines in. I've mentioned it a couple of times in the videos, but it's not just you. Who is it? Stick Pion. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but Stick Pion. It's not just you that makes this mistake. I have been teaching for 2 decades, okay? Every single class I've ever had, somebody who was really, really good at coding would make this mistake and beat themselves up about it. So please don't worry. It's a common thing that happens. You just need to remember that you need to always tell us what the definition is before we can use it. And I think with that, we'll probably finish up for today. I just want to say thank you very much to everyone that pops into the live chat. It's really nice to have you here, and it's really nice to have these conversations. Especially thanks today to Michael and JMC, who sparked the conversation really, really well with your questions. I'm just disappointed that GPT Chat isn't working today. Luckily, I didn't need it for any personal projects or anything throughout the day, but it would have been nice to demo how that was working. Luckily, we host Ghostwriter ourselves. It's all on our own servers. So normally, as long as Replit's up, Ghostwriter's working. So, if you fancy playing around with an AI today, go have a look. I do hear rumors as well of a self-service trial of Ghostwriter rolling out. So you may be one of the lucky ones that has that ability to put yourself in the trial if you want to test it out and see how it goes. It is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. I would recommend it. I would say that. I spent the entire week getting to know the nitty-gritty of it and really digging into it to write this course. But keep an eye on the Learn page. We are adding new content. We've got stuff from Bloom Tech on Java this week. And certainly, JMC, if you're interested in looking at some other languages, I'll just jump back over here, sorry. If you're interested in looking at some of the languages, there's some good stuff on the Learn page at the moment. And I've enrolled in them, unfortunately, so I can't show you how to get onto them. But there's a Bloom Tech Build a Sketch app with Java, which uses all that stuff there in a really nice way. And of course, we've got all our individual tutorials from our tutorial jam winners and a bunch of good stuff there. So please do go and grab what's on the Learn page. And hopefully either at the end of this week or the start of next, you'll see my course on Ghostwriter, where I take you through everything you could possibly need to be an expert in it and be able to use it to 10x your programming ability. Certainly, Michael, have a look at it. If you're doubting your own ability, try a bit of Ghostwriter. It will support you more than replace you. Certainly, it's a really good feature for that. But guys, thank you very much. I hope you've had a great hour with me, and I will see you on the 22nd of December for the last Replit 101 of the year. Of course, I'll see you again in January after that. Let's see if Santa brings me a new head of hair or something. You never know. I ask every year. One day it might happen. But thank you very much for rocking up. And if I can click the button correctly, I'll put the ending on now with the beautiful little joke at the end. But thank you guys. See you soon. Don't forget to put your questions in the chat on the live session for next time. Get in there early if you can. Bye.